is up, Sneeples? We are back at it again with the heavy draft guide. We do this for every set. This is a more extensive overview, a more detailed look into draft itself. Now that I have quite a bit of drafts under my belt, I wanted to share what I've learned and how you can win your drafts, especially with RTN season coming. But first,
do you like this shirt? Well, you can get them at fleshandbaubles.com. You can even use our promo code SNEEP for 15% off your entire order. They got shirts, they got keychains, and they got more to come. So check them out, fleshandbaubles.com. Let's get back to the video.
So I like to start these out by explaining what draft style each set is, and this one is a triangle draft style, something very similar to Tales of Aria. Here we have a illustration of the triangle style draft. We have on the corners Brute, Warrior, and Guardian. These are our classes of heavy hitters. And the edges are Brute, Warrior, Warrior, Guardian, and Brute, Guardian. And the reason why this is a triangle other than the illustration itself is because you can draft cards that are Brute and Warrior, but as well as Brute and Guardian. So that means that your Brute cards can be connected to your Warrior cards, and your Brute cards can be connected to your Guardian cards. And the same is for each class. You have cards that can connect you to each of the classes, and therefore it forms this triangle. This is something very similar to Tales of Aria, and something that we can see allows you to stay open. But let's get into that. So as we see, edges are more important than corners, meaning that the hybrid cards are more important than the mono class cards. This is because they allow you to stay open, and in fact it rewards you for not committing to a class. The reason is because the more that you pick hybrid cards, the more you can see later on in the draft which class is open between your two classes that you're picking. So if you were drafting like a lot of Brute Warrior hybrid cards, then you can then see later on in the draft if you're seeing more Brute cards or if you're seeing more Warrior cards, and then you can pick between those two, and you would never have wasted any sort of picks because you can play with every Brute Warrior card you drafted. It also, by drafting the edges instead of the corners, you are choosing which class not to draft first. What I mean by that is, again here, if we are doing Brute Guardian, we are choosing not to draft Warriors. So before you even choose which class you are going to be drafting for the overall draft, you are first going to be choosing which class you are not going to be drafting. As I mentioned earlier, this does just reward you for staying open, and really, condemns you for committing to a mono class early on. This is a very, very open draft. Triangle drafts tend to be, so you should really look to stay open at least to midway of the first pack, but you could stay open to the end of the first pack too. All right, let's talk about the first 5 picks of that first pack. Let's talk about what we're doing, what we're looking for, how we're going about it. So first off, you want to pick the best cards first, even if they're monoclass cards. So if you see like a Blade Flurry, that's a pretty damn good card. You can go ahead and pick that up within the first 5 picks. I will say that hybrid cards are going to have more value in the first 5 picks than mono cards, but bombs are bombs, and those are cards that you should be on the lookout for. Now, if you're curious on what cards are bombs and what cards are higher graded than other cards, we do have a Patreon that I do share my draft list, my draft rankings with, and I do update those on the weekly. As the more drafts I do, the more of an updated grade I can give to each card. So if you're interested in seeing that, consider looking at our Patreon. But moving on here, with the first 5 picks, we're noticing which cards we're passing and which cards we're getting passed. So basically what we're doing is we're doing 2 things when we are picking our picks. We are going to pick the best cards, as we mentioned before, and we're going to have a note on, okay, that was a Warrior card, or that was a Brute Guardian card. We'll have some mental notes to kind of know where we are in the draft, and as far as like which class we're kind of leaning towards, but then we're also going to look at the rest of the cards in that pack and determine what is our neighbor likely to pick. If we are also passing, like, let's say an agile windup, but we are picking prime to fight because that's a bomb. So we picked the prime to fight as guardian card, but we are passing agile windup, and let's say yellow. That's pretty dang good. I mean, for brutes and warriors, that's pretty good. So we will have a good idea that our opponent is probably going to pick that card. So now we know that our opponent is going to be looking at brute and warriors. So we're kind of keeping that in mind. And then when we get past a pack, we're going to be looking at that pack and determining which cards are there and which cards aren't. And what I mean by that is, do we see a lot of guardian cards? Do we see a lot of brute cards? Do we see a lot of warrior cards? And which class do we see the least of? This will allow us to know what our neighbor to our right, the one passing to us, is more than likely picking. By knowing what your neighbors are drafting, this allows you to determine what's the best class for you to draft. Because if you can be a different class than your two neighbors, then you will more than likely come out with a draft deck that can go at least 2-1. And then finally, in the first 5 picks, do not commit to one class or hero. Even if you get a specialization card, do not commit to it, one class or hero. And I would honestly suggest not drafting specialization cards in the first 5 picks. I know the Good Time Chapeau is a good card for Betsy, and I would be fine if you wanted to pick it in the first 5 picks, but I would not commit to Betsy quite yet. It is way too early to commit to one class or hero within the first 5 picks. But let's talk about picks 6 through 14. This is when you are going to really be deciding which class you're not drafting. So again, you're going to be deciding which edge are you. Are you a brute guardian? Are you a guardian warrior? Or are you a brute warrior? By deciding which edge you are going to then know which class you're not drafting. And 6 through 14 really allows for that. You're going to be able to determine which class you are seeing more and less of when packs are being passed to you. And within these picks, hybrid cards have a higher value. And the reason is because, again, they are allowing you to stay open. They are allowing you to see more and more packs in order to determine which class or hero is open. So within the hybrid cards, you can stay open and kind of just keep on holding until you realize, yeah, brute is definitely open. I'm going to go brute. That's kind of what I just said here. You're going to be looking for signals for what class is open and what class your neighbor was most likely to pick. So again, here you are still passing to your neighbor to your left. And by passing them certain cards, you can then, have a good emphasis like, all right, I'm thinking they're probably going to be guardian after this. That is good to know, so that I can stay off of guardian. So when pack 2 comes around and that neighbor is passing to me, he won't be picking my cards, and instead I'll be able to get all the warrior cards I will ever need. So in the pack 1, this is when you review your picks, and this is when you are really gonna decide what class you are going to be. Now, if you're still unsure, if you have a ton of hybrid picks, but you have some, let's say you have some good brute cards and you have some good warrior cards, and you're not just 100% convinced you can go one way or the other, you can still stay open, but your time is running out. As long as you have enough hybrid cards to allow for that, then it will be okay. But you want to make sure you have drafted enough hybrid cards that if you made a late switch, you'll be okay as far as your deck count. We don't want to run crack baubles. Here, just you want to count your blues, you want to count your 6 powers, your beat chest, your wager, go, etc. Basically, once you decide what class you're going to be, you want to then decide how many more blues, how many more 6 powers, how many more beat chest, basically whatever that class needs in order to have a very functional deck. And that is what you're doing at the end of pack 1. So if you chose to be guardian, you then want to count up all your blues and be like, okay, how many more blues do I need from the next 2 packs in order to have a very good guardian deck? All right, so now that we're in pack 2, this is your last point to switch, is between picks 1 through 5 of pack 2. And this is only if you drafted enough hybrid cards to allow for that. So if you're in between brute and guardians, you drafted a ton of brute guardian cards, now you can determine, okay, I think I'm going to, since I'm getting past these big time brute bombs like runner and sin packing, I think I'm going to go ahead and be brute instead of guardian, which I may have been leaning a little bit more towards at the end of pack 1. However, I will say you do at this point have to commit because picking anything later than this is going to potentially hurt your draft quite a bit. So make sure you have your class by pick 5 of pack 2. You're going to have less emphasis on hybrid cards now that your class is picked, and you can pick more monoclass cards. The reason why you'd want to do this is that monoclass cards block for 3 generally, and blocking for 3 is very good in the heavy hitter set, as oftentimes a lot of the cards only block for 2. Block 3 cards are very, very good, but those tend to only be monoclass cards. So you're going to really look to get a little bit more of those, as well as you're going to fill in your draft pile with cards needed to meet your count. So basically what we were talking about before with the blues, the block 3s, the 6 powers, the beat chest, the gold production, that sort of stuff. You're looking to fill in the count that you need. So if I had 5 6 powers going into pack 2, you know, if I'm going to be playing brute, I want to have at least 15, so I better make sure I'm drafting quite a bit of 6 powers. And then armor is just another thing to look out for here. You might have gotten a few in pack 1. Some armor like flat trackers is very, very good. I would suggest picking that immediately. And we talked about good time chapeau. But other armor, kind of like the confront armors, is pretty good here, as well as hybrid armor. All right, so pack 3. Your first 5 picks are going to be your best picks of pack 3. Go ahead and pick those. Even if your count is like, oh, I still need like 5 more blues to make this deck really work. Well, don't worry about picking blues in the first 5 picks. Those are going to be your last good picks. So go ahead and pick whatever big red attacks or bombs that you see. The rest of the picks, you can look to emphasize drafting the blues you need, as well as armor. Try to make sure that in pack 3 that you are finishing up your armor set. And that's it as far as for the drafting portion. That's kind of the breakdown of each pack and how you want to go about it. Now let's go into the heroes of the arena and talk about what hero wants to do what and how to draft for that hero. So we got KO, who looks to clash and go wide for brute and makes the best use of 5 powers. So if you are drafting KO, you can draft 5 powers and not have such a heavy emphasis on 6 powers, which is nice, definitely. Sometimes you can have blue 5s, which is very good to have. The clash mechanic is just kind of a side bonus. Really with KO, you want to just try to go wide. Reinhardt looks to intimidate with the beat chest for the extra value. Just getting like the pump from Bonebreaker Bellow and Intimidate is very, very nice. And 6 powers are very, very important. At least with the beat chest mechanic, it is not a random discard. It is a discard of your choice. So you don't need to have like almost everything be a 6 power. Instead, you can work with having at least 1 to 2 6 powers in your hand when you play Reinhardt. Betsy looks to wager attacks to overpower damage. She's really looking to put the most for 3 for 7s, and those are the 3 for 7s like Wage Vigor and Wage Might. These are very, very good for Betsy's. Wage Gold's another one. And then, yeah, just looking to overpower to really finish the game or just make a good use of like a turn 0. Victor looks to blocks, especially with the clash cards, and then is able to use gold to ensure to win the clash, which means you do want a lot of gold production and means you want a lot of block 3s. I really like having Thunk and Wallops in here. You know, if you're playing Betsy, you'll play those cards too, but they block for 3 and they work with clashes very well. So those are good Victor cards. We'll go over each here a little bit more in detail coming in these next slides. Kasai, you're looking to draw cards, allowing for your free sword swings, and you're going to make the use of the gold to allow you to draw some cards. And in Olympia, you're going to be wagering attacks to create additional gold, which can be great in the late game when you have, let's say, 1 to 2 blues in your hand, and you're trying to just find some sort of attack reaction or some sort of wage red attack. Gold will allow for that. So again, here, just like with Betsy, you want the 3 for 7s, but you get to have attack reactions instead of the overpower, which is always nice. All right, let's talk about KO. Let's talk about how we should draft for him, what cards we should look for. This is going to be a little bit of a recap on how to draft KO. Over half your deck should be 5 attacks or greater, and you want about 10 blues. The reason why, you can actually go around to like 10 to 12 blues, but you really want a good amount of blues because you do want to attack and then come in with the claw afterwards or something. You want to try to at least have 2 attacks a turn. And the way to do this is getting agility. So cards like Lead with Speed, Agile Windup, Assault and Battery, these are great cards to make agility. Agility is very, very good as a token, and KO is going to look to use it. Wild Ride and Bare Fangs are better suited for KO. You'll have more hits because of the 5 attack power being bumped to 6 with KO's ability. So these cards are very, very good, and then Wild Ride having Go Again is always very nice. So these are cards you kind of want to look out for if you determine that you are drafting KO, which would be about pack 2 and pack 3. You can get fatigued as KO, so just plan to run over 30 cards, because you do tend to fatigue yourself. All right, let's talk about Rhinar. Kind of an underrated hero. Definitely should look to not count him out when it comes to draft, that's for sure. So he does require about at least half your deck have 6 powers. Again, Beat Chest isn't a random discard, so you can get away with just having 1 6 power in your hand to be able to get a Beat Chest mechanic going with the Intimidation. But you do want to try to have about half your deck so that you can have 2 6 powers in hand, so you can attack with 1 as well as be able to discard the other. And then Beat Chest is the best way to intimidate here. There is a few things that will draw and discard at random, but again here, Beat Chest is not random, so that is a very important factor for Rhinar, and that's why we really like it. You look to set your deck to block and intimidate. The good thing about Rhinar is he has a lot of the brute cards that will block for 3. I mean, obviously KO can run all these cards as well, but KO is going to be running cards like Wild Ride and Bare Fangs, which you should as Rhinar as well, but you will only be running the reds as they are 6 powers, where KO will be running the yellows and maybe even the blues, and therefore you'll have less block with KO, but you are looking to go more aggro. With Rhinar, you do tend to have a little bit more block cards. Bonebreaker Bellow is a block 3, and that is a card that you will be playing as Rhinar, as well as the attack that gets a bonus if you intimidate. These are all block 3, so Rhinar can block very well. So you can do a little bit of blocking and then coming in with an intimidation. On to Betsy, you're gonna, because she's a guardian, you're gonna want to draft around 12 blues. You can even go more, honestly, and at least 6 red wager attack cards in order for Betsy to work. Now you don't need like 12, and the reason is because if you can arsenal one of them at some point in the game and just keep playing it for 3 for 7s, keep your one that you're keeping around for them to be around 5 or less life, then you can use Betsy's ability to end it. And that's really the only wager card that matters the most, right? The one that ends the game. And so Betsy's overpower ability should really only look to end the game, or if you just happen to have extra cards to be able to use her ability on. Bigger Than Big and Big Bop are great turn 0 cards. I was very off these cards in the beginning, but playing Guardian, I realized that these are just phenomenal turn 0. Unfortunately, that's really the only turn you will be playing them, as this is a faster format, so you don't really have the life total to set up, but if you can get a red or blue on turn 0, that's pretty nice. So I wouldn't draft too many of these just because they're only great turn 0, but maybe you get an agility token, maybe you can attack and then come in with one, who knows. And then finally, 3 for 7s are your most efficient attacks. They are just super solid. I would wager just about every time. There's really not too much of a downside to wagering, so I think you just always wager even if you don't have the Betsy overpower ability. And then don't force the overpower. I mentioned this a little earlier, but if you are playing to overpower every single turn, then what can happen is that you're taking more damage than you really have to, and it may not come out to your favor. If you have the extra card, if you have the tempo, go for it. But if you feel like you are taking extra damage just to overpower, then it's not worth it. All right, so Victor, again, you're drafting at least 12 blues. You can have more, but you want a lot of your decks to be 3 blocks. He is more of a tankier guardian, a more traditional guardian. He's going to look for clash cards. You're going to look for productions. Gold production. Test of Strength does both, so that is one of the best cards for Victor for sure. But you have your Clash of Mind, you have your Clash of Vigor, and then you have your Thunks and your Wallops that work very, very good for him. So these are all cards you're looking for once you decided you are a victor in the draft. Your play style is you can fatigue your blocks, and then you can just come in with efficient 3-for-7s. You know, if you get a Miller's Grindstone, you can really just fatigue your blocks and then just come in for 4. Victor has a way to just survive with as many 3 blocks as possible, fatiguing your opponents of their big attack and then coming in big later on, maybe with a wallop, maybe with a thunk. All right, Kasai. All right, red attack reactions and agilities are big. That is because you are going to be swinging your swords mainly as Kasai, and agility allows you to get multiple swords off. Draw cards and gold productions help out a bit. She does have gold production within her own ability. You might be able to get that off 1, maybe 2 times a game, so I wouldn't focus on that too much. I do like draw card abilities, particularly draw swords. Gives a pump and allows you to draw a card. That's very good. Then you can just swing your saber for free, but you do have other cards that may not be so obvious, like Trade-In. Trade-In's a very good card. Allows you to draw a card to start your turn, basically coming in from Arsenal to have go again. These are the type of cards you want to look for to just get Kasai going to swinging her swords. And then you're going to want to whittle your opponent down to about 5 life. When they start getting the single digits, your chances of winning go up. I mean, that's kind of obvious for any hero, but particularly with Kasai, her 2-card hands are better than any other class, basically, because you could have a blue and a red attack reaction, and then with those 2 cards, you can represent 5. And if they're at 5 life, then they have to treat every sword seriously, which means that they have to start blocking every single sword. And this is to your advantage, because once your opponent feels forced to block your swords, then you are winning. You are slowly winning a Kodachi race, and if they can't present enough damage back, then you can start using your attack reacts and banking another one. So it gets very hard for your opponents once they're around that 5 life range. So they kind of almost start at 15 if you think about it. All right, and then Olympia runs very similarly to Betsy. So you're going to be wanting to draft around 12 blues. And at least 6 wages to get, you know, full value off of him. Your blues are going to help you do these 3-for-7s, and that's why you want them. You're going to come in with attack actions a little bit more than like Kasai would, but you do have attack reacts to ensure you can win your wages, as well as just coming in with the swords with attack reacts as well. So very good overall. Allows you to maybe win a few clashes if you're facing Victor because you have attack actions. It's just more of a more well-rounded warrior, where Kasai is more going for the sword wins, which is both works, obviously. And that is it. That is the heavy hitters draft extensive overview. Just go out there and have some fun. Practice, practice, practice. RTN season is here, so we want to make sure that we have the tools we need to get that invite. Special shout out to all of our Patreon members, especially Alex, Luis Bueno, Brandon Flores, John E, Jonathan Boyer, Maxime Delu, Lucas Izumi, and S. Thank you for being a Patreon and supporting us. But thanks guys for watching, and keep on fabbing.